This is the first search for the worst cartoon of 2024, and it will almost entirely consist of me trying to explain why this largely hated Cartoon Network show from the early 2010s is actually a surreal masterpiece that was ahead of its time. A misunderstood classic, if you will. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if there's something wrong with me. I don't know if I'm suffering brain rot because of some of the shows that I've looked at on this series. I don't know if it's because I'm still recovering from Family Gal, but The Problem Solverz is a good show. In fact, it is one of the greatest cartoons ever made. It is a masterpiece of animation, and I will not tolerate any slander or disrespect towards it. Today, we're going to be looking at The Problem Solverz. This is a show that I actually watched when I was a kid, but I had almost no memories of it at all. Whenever I saw people talk about it, all I could think of was, oh yeah, it's that really ugly show on Cartoon Network, and that was a thing that happened. I only remembered one episode of the show. It was like the very first episode, and the only things that I remembered about it were that it involved roller coasters, time travel, and pizza, and that's it. Near the end of 2023, I ran a poll asking what show did y'all want to see me cover for the first search for the worst cartoon of 2024, and this show won with like no competition, so yeah, I knew immediately when I had the chance I was gonna go into this and see what it's all about. I didn't know what to expect from this show, but I especially was not expecting to actually kind of love this show. I'm not even gonna lie, it caught me by surprise. Before anything else, let us discuss the elephant in the room, the art style of this show. This show has a very unique art style, a very unique animation style. Everything is very bright and colorful and neon and whatever. I've seen a lot of people say that this is one of the ugliest cartoons ever made and that it's just a really unappealing art style, and I'm willing to bet that most of the hate that this show gets solely comes from its art style and nothing else. At first, before I actually started watching the show again, I thought, yeah, I agree, this looks ugly, this is hideous, oh my god, what were they thinking, blah blah blah. But then, like, actually sitting down and watching the show, watching different episodes of it, I kind of with the art style of this show, I'm not gonna lie. It's weird and strange and surreal, but I kind of love it because of that. It's just really psychedelic and trippy. You can definitely say a lot of things about the Problem Solverz, but one thing you cannot say is, for better or worse, there is no other cartoon that looks like the Problem Solverz. It is a very visually unique looking show. There's no other cartoon in existence that has the same art style or whatever as the Problem Solverz. There are some instances where it's like sensory overload and like there's like epileptic moments, like moments that could trigger seizures, and I will admit that it's not an art style that has a very widespread appeal to it, but I cannot deny it's a very interesting looking show, and to be honest, this isn't even the ugliest cartoon I've looked at. Stuff like our cartoon president and like the prince and whatever are like uglier than this, honestly. Those have way worse looking art styles. The Problem Solverz first aired in 2011 on Cartoon Network, where it would run for 18 episodes. Something that not a lot of people know about the show, though, was that 2 years after its initial run on Cartoon Network, in 2013, it received a second season that was available to watch on Netflix, and it ran for 8 episodes. And then sometime in 2015, the show was removed from Netflix, which initially made me concerned that these 8 season 2 episodes would be lost to media, but thankfully, that ended up not being the case. I managed to find the season 2 episodes online. Now listen, if I was literally any other cartoon YouTuber, I would make a snarky comment about how, oh, nothing of value was lost, am I right, guys? But because of past events that have happened on this series, I take preservation of the shows that I cover on this series very seriously. I'm not ashamed to admit that I have archived every single episode of It's Fred, Slippin' Jimmy, The JoJo and Bobo Show, The Red Ape Family, and Family Gal should the worst happen to any of these shows. I cannot let Family Gal become lost media. I cannot let the worst cartoon ever made become lost media. I'm sorry. So before I started watching this show, I wanted to give it a fair chance. I knew about the whole, like, oh, it's ugly and whatever, it has an ugly art style, but, like, I wanted to look past that. I didn't want to be like every other cartoon YouTuber that thought, oh, this show is ugly, therefore it's bad. I wanted to look at this show beyond the art style, you know? Separate the art from the art, if you get what I'm saying. You know, look at the other aspects of this show besides its art style. And boy oh boy, do I not regret doing that. This show has a very strange, surreal style of humor, which I guess is fitting with the weird, trippy art style that it has. It really does make me question how this show aired on Cartoon Network and not Adult Swim. Like, this is the most Adult Swim cartoon to have not aired on Adult Swim at all. This doesn't even feel like it should be a kid's cartoon. This feels like it should be like for adults, you know? This is an adult cartoon that's forced to be a kid's cartoon against its will. Apparently the show was originally pitched to Adult Swim, and a pilot was made for the show named Neon Gnome. However, Adult Swim turned it down because they thought it was too mind-blowingly cute for their channel, and they believed that it would be more appropriate for Cartoon Network, which is really crazy to me, because this would fit in perfectly with Adult Swim. I'm willing to bet that this show would have a significantly better reputation if it was an adult-oriented show that aired on Adult Swim. This feels like the kind of show you would see when it's like, you fall asleep watching Cartoon Network, and then you wake up at like 3 in the morning, and you just see this is on your TV screen, you know? It's like the weirdest thing ever. So the show follows 3 characters: a human named Horace, a robot named Roba, and a brown thing named Alfie, as they try and solve different problems, as the name of the show suggests. There is a lot of admittedly really interesting ideas in this show, I guess to further tie into the weird, surreal aesthetic that this show has. Like, for example, one episode revolves around a roller coaster that can travel through time, and another episode involves elevator racing, which is basically street racing, but with elevators. Again, if I was literally any other cartoon YouTuber, I would criticize this, but for some reason, I don't have a problem with this. I think this is kind of good, actually. I think there might be something wrong with my brain. I think I have sat through so much f***ing garbage on this series that it has given me brain rot, and now I think that this show is unironically good. If I reviewed this much earlier on into the search for the worst cartoon, I would probably hate this a lot more, but considering some of the stuff that I have sat through on this series previously, considering the fact that I had to sit through stuff like Family Gal and The Prince and whatever, High Guardian Spice, just a lot of f***ing garbage shows, I think it has f***ed up my brain to the point where, like, I think this is good, unironically. I have no shame in saying that. For this video, I decided to watch a handful of Season 1 episodes and a handful of Season 2 episodes, but I also decided to go and watch the aforementioned original pilot of the show, Neon Gnome, which was made sometime in 2008. And I've gotta say, it's even more weird than the final show, and it also makes me wish that this show took this route instead when it became a full-fledged series. I have no idea how Adult Swim looked at this and thought it was too mind-blowingly cute, and like Cartoon Network would be perfect for the show. Like, nah, this is prime Adult Swim material, this pilot. It doesn't get any more Adult Swim than this. Neon Gnome revolves around the 3 characters trying to get rid of a giant rollerblade that's in their possession. I believe this rollerblade belongs to their landlord, who is only in this short and isn't in the final Problem Solverz cartoon, to my knowledge. There's just a lot of weird stuff in this short, and I honestly I kind of love it. This does go back to what I said earlier about how this is like the kind of show that's like you wake up at like 4 in the morning after falling asleep watching Cartoon Network, and like this is on your TV. This weird psychedelic surreal is on your screen. It's even more weird and surreal than the final show, if you can believe it. I also decided to watch a couple of the season 2 episodes because I wanted to see how they compare to the season 1 episodes, considering the fact that number 1, these episodes came out 2 years after the first season, and number 2, they were on Netflix and not Cartoon Network. And honestly, season 2, it kind of sucks, I'm not gonna lie. Season 2 isn't bad per se, but it's a lot more tame and normal compared to both the Neon Gnome and season 1. It's a lot less weird and surreal, which greatly disappoints me. I am probably the only person in the world that would say that this show was better when it was more weird and unhinged, but that's just how it is. I didn't really give season 2 much of a chance. I sat through one episode and I sat through half of another episode and I decided, yeah, this sucks. Season 1 is so much better than this. And so after season 2, the show was removed off of Netflix in 2015, and that's where the story of the Problem Solverz ends. Apparently, the creator of the show, Ben Jones, had another cartoon in the mid-2010s about ducks, I believe, and I have no idea how it compares to the Problem Solverz. It is a more adult-oriented cartoon compared to the Problem Solverz. I have no idea if it's good, if it's bad, is it better or worse than the Problem Solverz? I don't know. But I figured I might as well bring it up here. I genuinely believe that this show was ahead of its time. If this show came out today, it would be considered a masterpiece. People in 2011, they just weren't prepared for the show. They just weren't prepared for it at all. I mean, to be fair, considering the fact that 13 years have passed and somehow this still hasn't gotten a critical reevaluation yet, it leads me to believe that people in 2024 still aren't ready for the Problem Solverz, which only makes it even more ahead of its time than I thought. You would think that with the rise of surreal humor in the late 2010s and early 2020s, you would think that in a time where Skibbity Toilet is the most popular animated series right now, you would think that people would look back at this show in retrospect and think, oh, you know what, this is actually a misunderstood masterpiece. It was ahead of its time. We didn't understand it in 2011, but now in 2024, we completely understand it. Nope. Nothing like that has happened yet. I'm surprised by that. The fact that this visually unique, visually interesting cartoon is considered ugly garbage is just mind-boggling to me, seriously. You know what? Now that I think about it, maybe the people that made a big deal about how CalArt's style was bad and how every modern cartoon looks the same and whatever, maybe they had a point all along. I just couldn't see it at the time. Also, this goes without saying, I feel like it's stupid for me to bring it up here because it is super f***ing obvious, but just because a show has that round face, bean mouth, Steven Universe art style doesn't mean it's bad automatically. I can't believe that has to be said. I feel like that's just common, obvious knowledge, but I guess not. I gotta put that up as a disclaimer. Actually, nah. Why stop at the Problem Solverz? I want to see a critical re-evaluation for the 4 weird, surreal Cartoon Network shows of the early 2010s. I want to see people acknowledge these shows as being ahead of their time. To be fair though, Uncle Grandpa has gotten a bit of a critical re-evaluation. I've seen more people be positive towards Uncle Grandpa, so you know what? At least nature is healing, slowly but surely. At least people are finally coming to their senses and realizing that Uncle Grandpa was always a good show. It's so ironic to me that cartoon YouTubers in the early 2010s would say that Uncle Grandpa is unwatchable random equals funny garbage, only to then turn around and say like Ren and Stimpy or Cow and Chicken or whatever are classics, as if either of those shows are any better or different from Uncle Grandpa. Like, I know I'm gonna make a lot of people mad for saying this, but like, how are these two shows any better or different from Uncle Grandpa or the Problem Solvers? Like, I don't get it. No, you don't understand. Cartoons that have weird, surreal humor in them are perfectly fine if they came out in the 90s, but if they came out in the 2010s, then they're bad. Gotta love nostalgia bias, seriously. Thing from my childhood, good. Thing not from my childhood, bad. It is the stupidest logic I have ever heard in my life, bro. If Uncle Grandpa came out in the 90s, it would be considered a classic. If Ren and Stimpy came out in the early 2010s, it would be considered garbage. I could easily see Ren and Stimpy coming out in like 2011 or 2012, and instead of being considered a cherished cartoon classic, it is instead lambasted by every cartoon YouTuber you could possibly think of. Like, I could easily imagine Mr. Enter making a million animated atrocity videos talking about, oh, this show is the reason why modern cartoons are garbage. I miss the 90s when we had real cartoons like Fanboy and Chum Chum and Breadwinners. Like, it's so easy to imagine the roles being reversed. It's not even funny. You know, throughout this video, I keep talking about how this show was ahead of its time, but at the same time, funny I know, this show feels like it's very much of its time. This show has that epic, awesome aesthetic that the early 2010s just kind of had. This is a show that could have only existed in 2011. I don't know how I could be able to elaborate on this, but hopefully you will understand what I mean by this. Hopefully this will make sense to you somehow. I understand that this is a bit of a controversial opinion, and even though I keep parading this around as a misunderstood masterpiece, I admittedly can sort of understand why people don't like this show. Really, the only valid criticism that could be had for this show is a lot of the colors in the show could be it could affect those with like sensitive eyesight. It could like induce seizures and whatnot. But that's kind of it, really. I didn't watch every episode of the show, so I could be wrong on this, but I was genuinely surprised by how very little toilet humor there was in the show. This does feel like the kind of show that would have a lot of toilet humor in it, and yet surprisingly, I almost never saw any toilet humor in the show, which is a plus. It is there though, and it is honestly pretty cringy, but thankfully, from what I can gather, it is rare, so there's not really much point in complaining about it. This is just a really weird show, and I'm surprised it hasn't gotten like a cult following yet. This feels like the kind of thing that people years on from now would just remember. It's like, this is like a fever dream cartoon. That weird, surreal, trippy Cartoon Network show from the early 2010s that like, we remember it. You know, I kept talking about that stuff with George of the Jungle 2007. I think this is a much more appropriate show for that. This is the Cartoon Network fever dream show, not George of the Jungle 2007. Is this a controversial opinion? Yeah, it is. Do I care? No, not really, because I wholeheartedly believe that the Problem Solvers is a misunderstood masterpiece of animation, a show that would receive critical acclaim if it came out today, and was a more adult-oriented show that didn't air on Cartoon Network, and instead it aired on Adult Swim. Actually, never mind. I think it's best that we keep this far away from Warner Bros. Discovery. I don't want David Zaslav to ruin this masterpiece over here. I went into this show expecting it to be unwatchable, random equals funny garbage, and what I end up getting is a strange cartoon that was ahead of its time, and it also made me realize the double standards that the cartoon community have when it comes to cartoons that have a weird, surreal style of humor. Like, I would genuinely love a lengthy, detailed explanation in the comments on how Ren and Stimpy is a cherished cartoon masterpiece, while Secret Mountain Fort Awesome is unfunny, random equals funny garbage. Because to me, they might as well be the same show. I don't see the difference. If Ren and Stimpy is good, then so is Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. If Secret Mountain Fort Awesome is bad, then so is Ren and Stimpy. I don't make the rules. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.